and welcome. Today, we're pleased to have Brother Roger Wareham. Roger Wareham is one of the most extraordinary individuals that I have had the pleasure of meeting, and I'm pleased that he's here to dialogue and communicate with you young brothers and sisters today. Maya Angelou once said that people define themselves in relationships to their heroes and sheroes. And we're privileged to have an authentic hero here today, a man of color, a man of substance, a warrior. Mr. Wareham, thank you for coming today.
Thank you, and that's an overwhelming introduction. I don't think I deserve it, but I thank you, and I'm honored to be here, and I understand that this group has some questions they want to ask, and I'm open to it.
Okay. Before they do that, I'd like you to give them some sense of your education, some sense of the influences in your life, and some sense of the activities that you're presently involved in.
Okay. As I told the last class, excuse me, I went to nursery school at Wadley. So I was here like in 1952. So that was the first school I ever attended, was Wadley. So I was born in Harlem, born in Harlem Hospital, lived in Harlem most of my life, still live in Harlem. Went to Wadley, went to PS 129. Then I went to Horace Mann High School. I went to Harvard College in 1968, and I went to Columbia Law School in 1973. I went to college during a period of time when there was a lot of things happening in the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement. I was involved in that. In school, I helped set up the first Afro-American Studies department in Harvard. I was in the first graduating class in Afro-American Studies. I was involved in a lot of community issues in Harlem when I came back from school and while I was in law school. So I've always been involved in struggling around our community. Someone had asked me what have been the influences in my life. Obviously my parents and my family has been a great influence. Malcolm X was a very big influence, because I think he taught me, he articulated, he exemplified what it is to be a black man in the United States and what it is to take a stand against racism and take a stand for your people, and I think that's very important. He emphasized the importance of education and also of seeing ourselves within the context of the world, and not simply as being in Harlem, not simply as being in New York City, not simply as being in the United States, but as being part of Africans in the diaspora. So those are a few of the things. So I think maybe if I get some questions from you, can flesh some of that out. I do a lot of work. I'm an attorney. I do a lot of work around police brutality. I do work around political prisons in the United States. I'm the head of a non-governmental organization called the International Association Against Torture, which has relations with the United Nations. So I go to Geneva, Switzerland twice a year to deal with the United Nations and to take the situation particularly of black folks and of Latinos in the United States to the United Nations to talk about human rights violations. And so those are a few of the things I do. So I'm open for questions. Somebody has to be first. And the way you can do it, the easy way or the hard way. The easy way is if somebody volunteers. The hard way is Mr. McIntosh pick somebody out. So you can play the odds.
While you're thinking, I'd like to pose another question to you. And as soon as he answers this question, I'm hoping that there will be a queue of you ready to ask some questions. This is a rare opportunity. My question is this. In light of all of the challenges that face us as a people, what do you consider the most crucial obstacle facing us?
Nothing like asking an easy question. The most crucial obstacle, I think it's the most crucial obstacle facing us as a people in terms of what we have to deal with, I think is the obstacles in our mind. I think that the biggest obstacle to blacks and Latinos moving forward in the society are the obstacles that they've put into our mind around what we cannot achieve. That you can't do this, you can't do that. So a lot of times it's like when you're playing ball with somebody that you don't have to guard. You say he's a self-check because he's not going to do anything, he's not going to hurt us, so you don't have to guard him. And that's what they do to our minds. They, a lot of times they do it in the schools. We get taught that we can't learn, we can't read, we can't think. The most important thing I think you can take out of being in school is to be able to think critically. That's even more important than a degree. A degree is what you need if you want to get a job. But the ability to think is something that you can always get a degree if you can think. You can have a degree and not be able to think, and you've probably encountered some teachers that prove that to you already. That you have to be able to think, you have to ask questions, you have to be able to defend what it is you say you believe, and not just say it because somebody in authority said so. You have to be able to look at the world and then decide, what choices am I going to make? What sort of things are going to take me forward this way? What sort of things are going to put me in jail? And to begin to make some critical thoughts around what do you want to do and how you're going to lead your life. So I think that's the main thing. And we live in a system that from day one and in many different kind of ways, and some of them not just in school but on the television and the news, tries to create the mentality that we are genetic criminals, that we have no future, that we have no use and society has no use for us. And a lot of times some of us buy into that. And so those are the obstacles that we have to overcome. The one where we look in the mirror and say, I can do anything I want. And in understanding that society puts a lot of obstacles in your place, but the first one is the one in your mind. And I mean, that's what school's supposed to be for. It's supposed to be for, but in most instances isn't. And so you've got to push to demand an education, because there are many teachers who are committed to educating you, and then there's some they're just collecting their paycheck. And you've got to demand an education, because when you leave Wadley, you've got to have developed the ability to look at things, to think critically, and to make correct decisions. So,
Mr. Wareham, given the gravity of the situation in the Harlems of the world, and in particular the high incidence of death at the hands of policemen, what do you think we as a community, and especially the youth, need to do and know in order to survive this epidemic of police brutality?
What particularly youth need to do gets back to the point I was raising around critical thinking. When I leave here, I'm going to a funeral for a young man who was killed by the police 2 weeks ago. I attended his autopsy 2 days ago. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever attended an autopsy. It's not a pretty sight. It's a young man who could have been the same as anybody sitting in this room right now. But all you have on that gurney is a body that's cut open. So they can take out his insides. They can look at where the 5 places he was shot, including in the head. So they stitched open. I mean, they cut open his head and they pulled his face down and took out his brain and looked where the bullet had gone and looked in his spine. And that could have been anybody sitting here, because the crime he committed was that he had this. The crime that Amadou Diallo committed was that he had this. The crime that Malcolm Ferguson committed was that he had this. And Patrick Dorismond. And we can go through names for over many years. And it's one newspaper writer called it breathing while black. That the crime you committed is that you're breathing and you're black. So the question becomes, well, what do you do? What can you do about it? Do you just have to accept it? The first thing is, like I told my son from the time he was young, when you walk out of this house, or when you walk out of this school, excuse me, you are potential targets, because, the police have the attitude that in our community, in Black and Latino communities, they can do anything they want to do and get away with it because they're not punished for it. So a couple of years ago, last year when Amadou Diallo was shot 41 times, people said, well, those cops, they got to go down, because there's no way they can justify shooting an unarmed man 41 times. And I said, that's not true, because I had been involved in a case in 1996, politically, out in Brooklyn, where there was a young man named Keyshawn Watson. Has anybody ever heard of him?
No.
All right. He was 24 years old. He walked out of a barbershop, got in his car. 3 undercover police from the same street crimes unit that killed Amadou Diallo rolled up on him, put their car in front so that he could not drive away, jumped out of their car, 3 white men in plain clothes, and opened fire on him. The last words he heard was that you're a dead MFer nigger. They shot him 24 times. He was unarmed. He hadn't committed any crime. Those officers were never prosecuted. They were never even indicted. The Brooklyn district attorney said, oh, they had followed proper procedure. So when Diallo was killed, I said, there's no guarantee. They find ways to let the police off. And the signal it sends to the police is, if you're dealing with black and Latino young men and women, you can do anything you want. So the question becomes, what is it you're going to do? First is to know that. You can't walk out of the school and think you can do anything you want because you have the same rights and privileges as white children your same age. It just doesn't work that way. You have to become organized. I work with a group called the December 12th Movement, and one of the constituent organizations of the December 12th Movement is a group called the Code. The Code is called the Code. It's a code of conduct for young people. It's talking about, in an earlier class, somebody asked me, how is Harlem different now than it was when I was growing up? And I said, when I was growing up, there was a sense of community, and people looked out for each other. I mean, it wasn't heaven, but people looked out for each other. People in not just your family, but people in your block. The people looked out, people had your back, not just your posse, not just your partners, but generally people had your back. And you didn't find people selling drugs around school. You didn't find people shooting people in drive-bys. You didn't have that. And so the code, it talks about developing a code of conduct. The code came from a brother named Mutulu Shakur, Dr. Mutulu Shakur, who's a political prisoner. He's in prison because of his struggle for our liberation. And he has a stepson. Some of you may have heard the name Tupac Shakur. And you all know what happened with Pac. And Pac really had two sides. Pac had just a get-down street side, which was the one that got him killed. Then he also had a politically conscious side. And if you go through his music and listen to his music, you hear both of them warring with each other in terms of which one is going to really characterize what Pac was about. And unfortunately, it was the street, non-political, everybody just take each other out side that won. But the political side around what do we got to do and what are we going to struggle for each other came from the influence of his mother, came from the influence of his stepfather, Mutulu Shakur. And he developed a code. And about 4 years ago, I think it was 1994, there was a big concert out in southern Queens where Pac, he gave the concert and he talked about the code. And that's what the young people in the code struggle for, is to develop an attitude where there's truces between gangs, where there are no drive-bys, where people aren't snitching, where we're looking out for each other. And when we develop that, when there's a sense that when something goes down in the street, instead of just walking by and saying, well, it ain't me, so I'm not going to get involved, but we look to see what's happening, then the police begin to back up when they're doing something illegal. When we begin organized as a community, when we provide our own defense for our folks, when we don't let our partners take off older people, when we escort our elders from the train to their house, when we don't take off people when they're collecting their welfare checks, when we basically look out for each other's back, then the attitude of the police is going to change, because they're going to be able to see they're not going to be able to split us and pick us off one by one. But it's going to require people being organized. It's going to require people understanding what's the real, young people in particular, understanding what is the problem we face, and using your brain, which is why I talked about the importance of thinking critically, using your brain to say, how do we get out of this? I was the attorney for the Million Youth March. There were 2 of them in 1998 and 1999, just a block from here. The media tried to paint it in a way that would scare people off. The city said they were going to have 2 zillion police out there. The position of the mayor, first of all, was that we're not even going to allow you to hold a youth march in Harlem, as if the First Amendment to the Constitution didn't apply to black people and Latino people in the Harlem community. So we had to go into court to make the city back off to allow the march to happen. But the mayor and the police commissioner waged a war in the media to scare people off, to say, I don't want to go there because there's going to be violence. And any of you who might have been at the first march will know that the only violence that occurred was at the end when the police attacked the march. But that had an effect in the following year, because they're the system is very afraid that if you all get together to discuss your problems and work out solutions for it, they're not going to be able to continue to deal with us the way they have, including the killings.
You know, there's a saying in the Bible, and it goes, ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. We've brought you here because we want you to partake of the truth. Truth is essential for your survival. And we do this because we love you. We care about you. When Ms. Collins and I talked about trying to put this forum together and Mr. Wareham graciously agreed to come, we saw this as another opportunity for us to come together and make a statement to you, our people, our brothers and sisters, our future. Apropos our future, we have a young brother here who's going to make a gift to you, a literary gift of a poem entitled Endangered Species.
Okay.
Willie?
The poem, once he said, was Endangered Species. It was written by a friend of mine named Ronell Borland from my school on PS 144. We are young black men, so take a good long glance, because when it comes to survival, we haven't got a chance. The newest endangered species, the dinosaur of today, and the irony of it is we're the hunters and the prey. Young black males, Africa's kidnapped kings, but now here in America, they call us other things. Animals, game bangers, hoodlums, the list is getting bigger, and they got us calling our own selves niggers. In jail doing life because we were killed because we were raised. We weren't expected to live to 25, so I guess we are middle-aged. No support from anyone, no help anywhere. We couldn't even come together to save our own mayor. Yeah, it's tough here in the city, and some parents try to make it harder, trying to raise us tougher when you need to raise us smarter. We never asked for help. We're too black, too strong, too much pride, but our future is at stake, and that can't be denied. We are young black men with the slightest chance of hope, committed to the act of genocide by selling each other dope. We are killing each other's off, hundreds every day. Everyone else is turning their heads because it's the American way. So if you haven't noticed, we are slowly disappearing. Our laughter and our voices you will soon no longer be hearing. In the future, they'll read about us and how the way we died. By crack, by AIDS, by guns. The #1 victim of homicide. And soon will be nothing but memories, just legends of the past. And the question everyone is asking is how long will the black man last? And ladies, you're not safe either. The men was just a taste, because the end of the black men is the end of the black race. Thank you.
That was very powerful. Let's put a question.
Oh, me?
No.
There was a question
No,
here?
this brother right here had a question.
James? Okay. Why don't you step up to the mic, James?
Do you know how to stop the racism?
Don't know how to stop the racism?
Yeah, do you?
If I had the answer to that, we'd be free. But I think one of the ways to stop it is first to understand where it came from and why it continues. And I think that's probably a much longer discussion. But one of the things we were talking about down in the library was a book called There Is a River by a man named Vincent Harding, which is an excellent book in terms of how we got here, why we're here, and what do we need to do to move forward. The United Nations is having a world conference against racism in August, the end of August in 2001 in South Africa. And that's going to be a very, very important gathering. And one of the things that might be a real project is for you all to see about getting somebody to sponsor you to go to that, because it's going to be looking at the question of what race, where, how racism developed, which racism was developed as an ideology, as a set of ideas to justify for Europeans who call themselves Christians how they could justify kidnapping and enslaving Africans. Because how could a Christian justify enslaving another human being? So racism was developed as a rationale to say, well, those Africans are not really human beings, they're less than human. And so a whole system of ideas was developed in institutions to make that idea real, to make it as if that really happened. So when you look at the Constitution of the United States, it says Africans are 3/5 of a human being. So racism was developed as a set of ideas to justify an economic venture, which was enslavement to make money. And it continues to this day because it keeps people, if you a white person from the same background as you in terms of income should have more things in common with you than they do with Bill Gates. But the racism makes them think that they have more in common with Bill Gates than they have with you. Although you both living in the projects, both of your parents may be unemployed or have a job that you're 1 week away from being evicted. But white racism makes them think that, but I always got it over these black folks. And so when we begin to look at that, when we begin to look at why in the United States, now listen to the statistics, 1% of the population of the United States, 1% of the population, 1% of the families own and control 40% of the wealth. And the top 20% have 80% of the wealth. So that means that 80% of the people in the United States have just to divide between them 20% of the entire wealth of the country. So it means that there's a very small number at top and a big mass at the bottom who have to divide up whatever this country produces. And they're not all black. The majority of people in welfare are white. But because of racism, they think that no matter how poor they are or how uneducated they are, they're better than us. And they keep us fighting with each other. And we never get to a deal with the Bill Gateses, the Rockefellers, those people at the top who have gazillions more than we could ever dream of. But to defeat racism, we have to become united. We have to decide that we're going to confront it at every step, that we're not going to back down from it, and that there's different ways to do it, but we have to confront it and not just concede to it or give in to it. Yes?
Do you as a black man fear that police brutality will be a downfall in life?
Will be around for life?
No, will be a downfall in life.
Will be a downfall in my...
Because of the color of your skin.
Yeah. I've been arrested. I've been beaten by the police, and so I fear it in the sense that I know that there's no guarantee if I'm in a community, where I'm known, then I already got a problem because the police already have a problem with me. If I'm in a community where I'm not known, it's simply enough to have this, to be a target. They don't ask, did you go to Harvard? They don't ask how well you speak. They don't ask what your education is. They're just looking at this. That Diallo, they didn't know where Diallo was from. They didn't know he was from Guinea. They didn't know where Doris Mund was from. They didn't know he was from Haiti. They didn't know where Matt, all they look at is this. So if you're not if you're not aware of it, then you're crazy. If you're not aware of it, then you're walking around like a blind person in a field of landmines. You don't want to do that.
You're involved in any African American organizations, or do you plan on creating an organization?
No, I'm a member of the December 12th movement. I've been involved in black organizations for the last more than 30 years, different ones, but right now I'm a member of the December 12th movement and Black Men's Movement Against Crack, the Masters United for Human Rights. I head up I'm also the International Secretariat of the December 12th movement, which does work in the United Nations and also with the Organization of African Unity. So a lot of different, the New African Liberation Front, there's a lot of different ones because the only way we're gonna move forward and free ourselves is through organization. It's not going to be because somebody gets somebody gets a big salary like Keshawn Johnson just signed for $56 million, or Michael Jordan makes $30 million. That's not going to free us. It's going to be us organized as a people. That's the only way through organization that we can become, we can really become free and cover each other's backs.
I think we might have time for one more question. Well, I'd like to end with a piece by the Last Poets.
Which one?
Because, just because you're black. Because, just because you're black. You say you don't want to die because. I don't want to die because. You say you don't want to die because there's no cause to die for. Now, what would cause you to say that? Is it because you have a good job and a home in the suburbs? Or is it because you were pink and yellows, causing all the sisters to scream from a cause unknown? Malcolm, Martin, Denmark all died because they knew what was the cause causing all of us to be exploited and oppressed. I hope you get a cause to die for soon, because you're gonna die anyway, just because you're black. I leave you with that poem as a frame of reference. We've talked about some things that perhaps are not very comfortable, but you need to be aware of those things. We need you to survive. And I say that for very selfish reasons. If there's no you, there is no me. There is no us. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.